All right, so today we are continuing in this series looking at the journey that we've taken from ashes to life. And we started on that Ash Wednesday, and we'll end this series on Easter when we will celebrate life and the resurrection. And so it is a good time and opportunity for us. And we talked today in this passage, just one of my favorite long form, and it's like a whole chapter, this exchange that happens with Jesus and the disciples and the blind man and the Pharisees, and his parents are brought. It's just a whole thing, and it's just good stuff. And so we're going to jump right into it. This is where we're going to be today. So John chapter 9 is where that's all we're going to do, because there's so much material there. No need to jump anywhere else. So the road that leads to life is never easy. And this is what we've seen thus far. When we start with ashes, and then even that first week is the wilderness. And we're like, ashes, wilderness, there's a lot of stuff. And so what Jesus is trying to be able to tell us is that when you come and follow, that you're going to have some spots that aren't as easy as you thought it would be. Emily and I and Pastor were at a PLI thing, which is just a training thing that we're going through right now. And they call this path to discipleship, they say that you should always introduce the pit. And I'm like, okay, so the pit, that's another kind of synonymous word for the wilderness, right? So there's a part when you're following Jesus that you're kind of like, hey, I'm confident. I really want to follow Jesus. And then when you start getting into it, and you start getting into the Word, and you start getting into this life of sacrifice, you look at it, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I don't know so much. And so you get into this spot where you start to take a little bit of this dive down, and you're like, this doesn't feel good not to know. And you get into this pit, and you're like, what am I supposed to do here? Can't I just fast forward this? Can't I just skip this part and just get to the end where I'm going to be like, yeah, I know all this stuff now and I'm good? You see, today what we're going to encounter is a man who's going to go through some of this in a pretty short amount of time. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, he doesn't even know Jesus at the start. And here's the spot when it's the same sometimes when we have approached other people who've come and said, hey, I want to learn what it means to follow Jesus. And we're like, okay, this is well, that's hard, and I don't know if I want to do hard. Hard in my life right now, I don't have room for that. Okay. So you can put Jesus up on a shelf for now and say, Jesus, I'm going to come back to you when I feel like I have more capacity. Or you can say, Jesus, I know you're going to be with me even in the pit. So let's walk through this together. So today, this man born blind. There's a question on whether he was born blind, as we've heard already, and this question going back to, let's talk to the parents. Let's make sure. Was he really born blind? Was there some other complication that kind of said it? No, he was born blind. He couldn't see. You see, and Jesus is going to reveal something in the midst of this, that this passage is more than just about physical blindness or seeing. That there's going to be some spiritual connection here as well. So let's jump right in. John chapter 9. Let's go 1 through 5. Jesus was walking along the side. He saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his sins or his parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I'm here in the world, I am the light of the world. So, the disciples, of course, are looking for someone to blame, right? You see, in the midst of tragedy, we always try to be able to find the person to blame. We want somebody to pin this on. And this is the same thing. Can you imagine having a conversation in front of the person who's experiencing the tragedy? Right, who has been born blind, right, and they're walking by, and it's saying they're having this conversation. They're looking at the guy. He's sitting there because that's what the only thing he can do is beg. He can't get a job. He can't find a way to be able to take care of himself in these ways, and so what does he have to do? He has to rely on the goodness of strangers. But they're like, Jesus, Rabbi, right? Tell us, whose fault is this? Is it this guy's sin that caused his blindness? Or was it his parents' fault? Did they have sin in their life that actually was kind of moved right into his blindness, right? It was right there at his birth, right at his conception, that was his parents transferring this sin so that he would be blind his entire life. You see, we're always looking for someone to blame, and this is the theology that was proper for the day. As you can see, it was even spoken by Jesus' disciples who had been following Jesus. But you see, this isn't a new one. We go back to the book of Job, which is actually one of the earliest books ever written in all of the Old Testament. And in the book of Job, it's the same thing. Job, this tragedy has fallen you. What did you do? You should just repent because we know you did something wrong, even if you don't want to tell us. This is your fault. You see, so many times in the midst of these tragedies, we are looking for someone to blame. Well, that person must have had it coming because that's on them. We see people in the midst of tragedies where things have happened and things have occurred, and we're like, all right, well, we've got to find out why it was their fault and not their fault, right? We've got to find, right, because we want to pick a side, and this is our side, and our side can't be guilty, so it must be them, and so let's dig into why it was their fault. We need somebody to blame. You see the assumption that suffering must be because of the person's sin. And yet Jesus shifts the blame. He says, what if we instead asked, what is God doing here? What's God doing here in the midst of this man's blindness? You see, there's not a blame to be had. There's not a blame question. Was it his fault? Was it his parents' fault? What if Jesus is like, wrong questions. Let's say, what's God doing here? And that's what he's trying to be able to turn the disciples' direction, their vision. And he's saying, don't look for the blame. Don't look for the culprit. He said, look for God. It's the same thing when we're going through it. We're always going to try to be able to find a way to be able to blame something other than ourselves. We want to be able to say, how can I find the blame for my sin, right? I'm going to look at this and say, well, the devil made me do it. That's a good blame. We're going to shift it off to the devil. The devil's going to be the one who's going to receive all of this stuff. And it's not on me. I didn't do anything. The devil made me do it. Right? But instead, in the midst of any of this, what do we need to ask? The same question. Where's God's grace going to appear? God's grace is abundant. God's grace is always present for us. And so in the midst of everything, whether it's a sin that has gone poor, right, and we're looking at this and saying, well, who do I blame and all of this, or there's a tragedy outside of us and we're looking for someone to blame, we say, no, where is God going to appear? Where am I going to see the grace of God in this? Let's continue. Verse 6, then he spit on the ground, made mud with saliva, spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit here and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I'm the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and then told me to go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied. You see, there's the spot, Jesus, and this is the thing that Jesus hardly ever heals the same way. Have you recognized that in the midst of the Gospels? And the thing is that Jesus uses this really unusual method. Because when you've seen Jesus heal before, he could have just said a word. He could have said, open your eyes, see. He could have said something, he could have not even said a word. He could have just put his hand over his eyes and then he would have seen. He could have done a number of different things, and this is the unusual part about this that you shouldn't skip over. Because Jesus is using elements like dirt. Jesus uses his own spit. He puts it in there, creates mud, puts it on the guy's eyes, and we're thinking, man, that is disgusting. Please don't do that to me, Jesus. I don't want your spit mud on my eyes. But you see, this blind man doesn't know. And what translates to this man is that he put mud on my eyes. You see, the dirt was still that constant reality, is that something's covering your vision. This dirt is covering the way that you see things. And when he went to wash it off, he's like, now I can see. Obedience might be hard to believe, right? Obedience is saying, well, if I just believe this thing, right? If I'm just believe in God's faithfulness, that's a little bit hard because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's on the other side. And that's the real difficulty with us when we talk about this thing of faith, when we talk about trust. I don't know what's on the other side. So it's easier for me to just stay and say, you know what, I'm going to find the blame elsewhere. But today we can say God works through the unexpected. God uses unexpected means to be able to bring things to people that they never would have imagined. That maybe even some of his disciples were like, Jesus, I've never seen you, put mud on people's eyes from your own spit. This is weird. And yet each of them saw a miracle that day. Each of them got to be able to see that this was the man that they was sitting before them, a blind beggar. And that mud was put on his eyes, and then he could see. Faith is not a passive thing. That we can say, yes, faith is something that was given to us, but it's not something that we should sit back and just say, well, I've got the faith, that's all I need. Right, we hear from James where James talks about that faith, and he's saying there's something that should be alive when you are just a hearer of the word, and what do you do with it? If it's nothing, then you're like, well, what good was that? Be more than just a hearer of the word. Be something of a doer of the word. When you're trying to be able to say, well, Jesus says love my neighbor, I'm going to receive that, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to actually try to be able to strive to love my neighbor. Well, we missed it. You see, in this faith, the faith is not past. Faith has been given to us. And so God says, I'm going to continue to try to be able to strengthen that faith that is in you. And I want you to be able to see the ways in which that faith that's in you can blossom and grow. So is God calling you to trust before you see it? Some of you might be waiting in that little space in between where you're like, I'm here, but I want to be here. God, I'm here in the midst of that pit of discipleship where I'm thinking that you have a promise for me and a thing that's over here on this side, but I'm not there yet. And God's like, trust where you're at. Learn to be able to trust today before you even get to see the thing that God's going to be able to do. And once again, that's a really hard spot to be. But we continue with the story. Verse 13, then they took the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it, so he told them, he put mud over my eyes, I washed it, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, he's working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about the man who healed you? And the man replied, I think that he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see, so they called in his parents. They asked, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see? His parents said, we don't know. Or we know that this is our son, but that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or even who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, he's old enough, ask him. So for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him, God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner. I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied. What I do know is that I was blind, and now I can see. What did he do? How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed. I told you once, don't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he's ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it. You were born a total sinner, they answered. Are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. It's a long passage, but it's a very integral part to what's happening here, because what we see is that the Pharisees are not celebrating the restoration of this man's sight. They're focusing on the rules. You see, that was the whole big thing. Instead of being able to say, man, we're amazed right now that you were born blind and now you can see, they weren't even focusing on the restoration. They didn't care. They were saying, this man was working on the Sabbath when he wasn't supposed to. The rules. You see, and the rules are the thing that they are following their entire life. It's the rules that they believed kept them righteous. And so, therefore, they wanted to take these same rules and just say, this is the thing that's most important right now. None of this other stuff matters. You didn't follow the rules. This man didn't follow the rules and therefore is not from God. He's a sinner. But you see this wonderful progression that's happening in just these few amount of verses from the man that was born blind. He doesn't even get a name. He's just the man that was born blind. He starts with, he must be a prophet, right? That's a pretty general sense, right? I think this guy's got to be a prophet, like, because I was blind, now I can see, right? He goes through the justification for it. It says no one's been ever been able to do this kind of thing other than somebody who's already with God. If he weren't with God, this wouldn't have been possible for me to see. And then even when this man kind of has some of these quick jabs back at the Pharisees, and he's like, all these questions, it seems like you want to follow him. They're like, you're his disciple. And the man doesn't refute it. He's never seen Jesus with his eyes. And yet right now he's kicked out of the synagogue for his identification as a follower of Jesus. Spiritual sight grows when we have honest encounters with Jesus. He had an encounter with Jesus that's not like everybody else. He didn't get to see Jesus with his eyes. All he heard was Jesus' words. When we approach Jesus in an honest way and we're saying, Jesus, this is all of me. I'm not going to bring all of this flowery language, right? And this is what we're always afraid of when we're trying to be able to say, hey, who wants to pray, right? And we're always like, no, not me. No. I don't know all the words. You're like, what words? You see, an honest encounter with God is saying, I'm going to speak how I always speak. God, I don't know. God, it's hard to speak to you when I can't see you. You see, and there's an honest part of what we're bringing to God is that we are not going to be able to say, I'm going to pray like that of, whoever who has these beautiful, wonderful language of, the scriptures and the thing. Like, I don't know all of that. And you're like, it's okay. Jesus isn't telling you to come to him with all of those things. He's saying he wants you where your heart is right now. That's honest. That's not you trying to follow the rules and the language of what somebody else has tried to be able to put on you. This is saying, I'm going to come honestly to God with what I've got. And if it's in a language that you understand, then it's a language that God understands. We continue. We go back to the conversation once again, but I think, and this is important to be able to dig into. So once again, for the second time, they called the man again. They asked him, right, do you know this man? I don't know whether he's a sinner, but what I do know is that I was blind and now I can see. And this is the one, I'm just going to stop right there because we did go through the rest of it already. But it's in that simple response. I don't know. I didn't know Jesus beforehand. I don't know what life he carried out before. I don't know if he was a murderer. I don't know if he was a thief. I don't know what. You're telling me that he's a sin. He's like, but I don't know. I don't know that. But what I do know is that I was blind and now I can see. It's a real simple testimony. It's not filled with all kinds of backstory on like, well, once now I'm going to get used to knowing and what it means to follow Jesus, and I'm going to make, he's like, no, I don't know any of that. I don't have any answers. What I do know is that I was blind and now I can see. And it's in the simple, personal testimony that can be the most powerful. Because every time I come across this passage, when you're seeing this man and he doesn't have any answers, he's going to continue. I mean, he's pretty sharp, right? He's witted because he's pushing back against the Pharisees. Like he knows what he's doing, but he also says, I don't know. I don't know everything. And it's in that simplicity that we can say, you know, I don't know anything either. I don't know all of it. What I do know is a very simple message that what Jesus has done has changed my eternity. Somebody's going to be able to push back and say, well, prove to me that Jesus is real. Prove to me that God exists. Prove to me. You're like, I don't know. I was once blind and now I can see. And God has given us eyes to be able to see, ears to be able to hear. Then that really strong, powerful message is simple. We know who God has called us to be. All right, let's continue with the rest of that interaction. Now the blind man comes back to Jesus, verse 35. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man answered, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I want to believe, the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, I entered the world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind and to those who think they see, that they're actually really blind. Some of the Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, are you saying that we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, Jesus replied. But you remain guilty because you claim that you can see. You see, the blind man comes to Jesus in this last interaction with him, and he still didn't recognize Jesus because he'd never seen Jesus. Jesus found him, right? Jesus came to him. Jesus says, do you want to believe in this Son of Man? Do you want to believe? Yes, very much so. Jesus like, I am he. This blind man comes, he believes, and he worships. You see, this is the part that Jesus is like, you're trying to be able to do, right? He's giving sight to the blind. But you see, it's not just the physical sight that this man received. He was able to see through some of the ways maybe in which he grew up. With all the rules, with all the things, with all the boxes, and you get to be in this box. You are born blind, you got to be a beggar. This is the only thing that you're ever going to do until the day you die. But he sees another reality. And the other reality is that he has now spiritual eyes to see the Messiah. But the key passage in all of this, I believe, in what Jesus is trying to be able to see is this whole thing. I entered this world to render judgment. Right? He came to judge, right? But here's the thing, not just judge, right? But he's saying, I'm going to follow this up with, he says, to give sight to the blind, right? So they can see. physical eyes, spiritual eyes, all of it. He wants people that were blinded to be able to see the things that he was at work doing. But he says also to show those who think that they see that they're actually just blind. And it's a great reversal, because the blind see, and the confident religious folk are now actually saying, you remain in spiritual blindness. You're stuck. And we see the reaction of the Pharisees, because they're following this man still, and they know there's Jesus, and Jesus is coming up to them. And they're like, Jesus, are you talking about us? Like, we were raised in this. We followed all the rules. We did all the stuff we were supposed to do. How dare you tell us that we're blind? You see, humility is the thing that opened the door for this man to see. I don't know all of the answers. What I do know is that I was blind and now I see. Jesus further gives him sight to be able to see the things. You want to believe in the Son of Man? Here I am standing before you, and he worships him. He had eyes to see. The Messiah was standing before him. So what are we missing when we're always trying to say, oh, I know all the answers? Personally, myself, when I was growing up, I was the guy who did have all the answers. Right? I was raised in it, right? Since birth, I went to church, right? I studied the Bible. I went, like, there was a thing, and I had knowledge, right? And this is where you can have all kinds of knowledge and never have the faith to believe and trust in the promises of God. Because if you're trusting in your knowledge and you're trusting in, I see, I know, that can keep us blind. Where is God trying to be able to open your eyes today to be able to say, yeah, I'm okay with not knowing all the answers. And I'm going to trust God for this spiritual sight. I'm going to leave you with this statement. Sometimes the greatest barrier to seeing God at work is the assumption that we already see clearly. So let's test our assumptions. Let's go back to God with simple humility and say, God, open my eyes where I've been blind. Help me to trust in you today. In Jesus' name. Please stand and pray.